Welcome to the broadcast, my friends, and God save the King. If they ain't gonna wear tiaras, we can, can't we, my dear? Yes, we can and we will. Today's broadcast, a review of the Coronation, is in a no-nonsense style. I don't have time to be all over the place, so I want to keep as succinct as possible. My time is precious today, as I'm sure yours is as well. So don't think that I'm in some type of funk just because I'm being rather strident. I am buoyant. I am absolutely buoyant and on the clouds, but we need to get down to business, don't we, my dear? And thank you to anybody who sent me a tip jar treat for the Coronation. A small handful of you did, and please know that it is very much appreciated, sincerely. You know who you are. I wouldn't change a thing about today, with the exception of a tweak of the weather. That is the only thing. But even there, I feel we were blessed. There was no torrential downpour. It was still warm when I was outside. It was warm. And although it was soggy, like the late Elizabeth's coronation and her father's coronation, it wasn't absolute misery and hell for everybody. But I would have just tweaked a little bit of sunburst through the clouds to elevate the atmosphere a little. But that is the only tweak that I would have made. Tiaras and all. We'll speak about that later. But I am just absolutely thrilled. It was safely delivered. The logistics of this operation, Golden Orb, blow my mind. Thank you, Duke of Norfolk, Earl Marshal. Thank you to everybody involved. I couldn't organise a hen party, my dear. I tried a couple of times for friends that asked. You know, I make a fabulous guest. I can make a wonderful host, but the organisation of it is not my jurisdiction, dears. I'm talking 15, 25 people. So for this amount of people, all the troops, all the horses, and all the king's men, oh dear. It's blown my mind to watch it. Delivered safely. And all those nuisance problem makers, protesters, off to the tower with them. It was so satisfying to see. No one cared about your protests, my dear. No one cared. Off to the tower with you, carted off. And I didn't really see any neon signs anywhere. No, I didn't at all, actually, when they were on procession. So, oh, drowned out by the huge swarming crowds, weren't they, my dear? Wonderful. I am delighted with the outcome of the Sussex problem. I am delighted with I think it was the best possible arrangement. There was as little clamour as we could have possibly hoped for. So I offer my gratitude to the both of them. So far, no mischief making today. It was a celebration of colour. If you watch this broadcast, you know that colour is my thing, and the celebration of colour. Colour is life, and that is what it was today. It was a riot and fascination of colour that is very deeply and profoundly meaningful to me. Some unusual colours thrown in there as well. The unusual bright blues of the horse's bridlery, or whatever it's called. Fantasy stuff. Fantasy stuff. The theatre involved in moments like the anointing, well, throughout the entire thing, my dear. I mean, it was theatre. It was theatre in an ancient abbey. The anointing, and during the robing, the colour was so special. The glimmers of pink under the king's initial outfits with his ermines, and ermines galore everywhere, weren't there, my dear? The footmen dressed so fancy. The king with his buckled feet. We had no reason to be fearful, did we? We had no reason. And it wasn't some virtue signalling woke show either, was it? No, it wasn't at all. I think it got the tone just right. I didn't sense virtue signalling. It felt natural, and it felt that it spoke of his purpose when he was the Prince of Wales as well, and everything that he worked for and achieved during that period of his life. Yes, I cried throughout. Not as much as I cried during the Queen's services last year and the Jubilee, but I did cry throughout. I sobbed, yes, Zadok, the priest, but even more so, actually, God Save the King. That got me. It got me when he emerged. You know, towards the end, the king disappeared with the Queen. Backstage, if you will, and then he emerged, and again it was the colour that got me. The purple affair, the sort of emperor affair at the end. The purple number, my dear, because it wasn't even a sort of rich, royal, deep purple. It was a fancy, lighter, brighter purple. It's the nuance in shade and colour and tone that I speak to you about when we talk about the gems and fascinations in Tip Jar Corner, the pairings of various colours with the others that intrigue and fascinate me and get my juices going, my dear. And I was taken aback. I was shocked at the king, who I was going to say the ancient king, and of course he is not ancient. He's only just approaching his winter season. He's in the last few months of the autumn season. But at times he looked like an ancient king. I've got to say, bless him. You know, he has aged a lot, as we all do, but he's aged over the last few years, hasn't he, my dear? And when I was watching that documentary of him last week, The Making of a Monarch, you know, you can see how different he looked through the ages. He went through that he was the most cute child, wasn't he? Cute, adorable looking child. And then some of his extremities grew a little bit larger, and, you know, he was famous for having, you know, being all ears for quite a while, which they're not very noticeable now. It's more the fingers. But it's funny how the face shape was this sort of long affair, wasn't it, with the juggy ears for a while. And even though one could imagine that he was rather charming and handsome close up and in the flesh with great skin and great teeth, I feel that he was more attractive as he approached summer and into early autumn even. I thought he was very attractive and very handsome during his time when he married Camilla. More attractive than he was when he married Diana Frances. Yes. When he married Camilla Rosemary, I think he was absolutely gorgeous, to be quite honest with you, my dear, and stayed that way for another 10 years. You know, it's a bit of a shame not wishing an earlier death or the late Queen. A little bit of a shame that it didn't come 6-7 years ago, so he could have had that very handsome moment of crowning. But he is the oldest crowned monarch in history for Britain. So, and that's not to say that he doesn't look absolutely splendid, my dear, but he did look rather this ancient emperor there in his purples, didn't he? But I wouldn't have it any other way. It was just a confection, but no vulgarity, no gaudiness, nothing gauche, truly royal. But it just took me by surprise. Some of these fabulous choices, all the traditions were there. All the traditions were there. As I've mentioned in the last few broadcasts, the king is a man of impeccable taste, and that was displayed for us all. My overriding feeling throughout the entire ceremony was a feeling of joy, which is what we sorely need in the world, isn't it, right now? The joy of pomp, of pageantry, and of spectacle. And this king and queen are warm, and the late Elizabeth did things in her own way, and she was crowned at a much younger age. But her feeling was one of inscrutability, and it's something that I adored about her, you know, that you could never really sense what she was feeling, and she was largely, I was going to say expressionless, but of course we see her with many expressions and broad smiles, but she had that special enigmatic quality of being able to switch it off when needed, didn't she? And that was the feeling during her coronation, when, if I was to compare the two, whereas our king and queen now exude warmth, wear their emotions on their sleeve, and it was so evident with the king, you know, a feeling, thinking man who takes it incredibly seriously, a deeply religious man who, and that aspect of the proceedings was not lost on him, and it was a deeply, profoundly moving Christian ceremony, Anglican ceremony. It wasn't watered down, it wasn't diluted, for all its open-mindedness and welcoming nature of the ceremony. It wasn't. Warmth. I saw warmth. I must say I have no idea how they all get through these things with such nerves for holding the regalia. So much can go wrong, can't it, my dear? You know, there are a few times I had to hold my breath. You know, when they have to pick up the crowns and the scepters and the little bits and bobs and the little rings, you know, with the shaking of the hands, and get it on the head just right, and walking around with long robes. And lots of these people are in their 70s and 80s, including the king and queen in their 70s, wandering around up and down the slippery steps and the Cosmati pavement. I was clutching my pearls, but nothing went wrong. It was fabulous. Nothing went wrong. And I've got to say, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, impressed me a lot. And I've raised an eyebrow at him in the past. Perhaps some stories of his reputation haven't charmed me, and also some things that he has said and done in the past haven't impressed me. But I was really impressed today. I didn't especially warm to the idea of him conducting the ceremony, but he was absolutely fantastic. He really was. He impressed me. And the inclusion of the variety, you know, I don't like that word, diversity. The variety of the congregation felt as natural as any Commonwealth gathering before the BLM movement, because from an outsider looking in, especially for those abroad perhaps who haven't seen, for example, the annual Commonwealth Day ceremony that takes place in the same abbey, you might see the singers of colour, the various performers, the choirs, and think, oh, they're virtue signalling here and there. No, it is exactly the same as it's been for all those ceremonies that royalty have been involved in for many years, and way before any of the BLM movement, Black Lives, all this kind of thing. So no, he is not virtue signalling. It is not a nod to anything that they weren't nodding to before. So, you know, I just want to make that point, because I don't want the likes of the House of Sussex or their kinfolk or those that might support them and besmirch monarchy making suggestions otherwise. No. Our royal family have always embraced their beloved friends and imperial family, if you will, with enthusiasm and respect. So I want to make that point for what it's worth. Before the service, we were treated to the soprano, pretty Yende, and she was absolutely sublime, looking so over the top in that beautiful yellow daffodil number, but this is a chance and an opportunity to be completely over the top. And she was spectacular. What a voice from heaven. And I saw her interviewed a couple of days before the coronation, and she was so respectful about the king. You know, he helped hand-pick these performers, and he had an association with her going back when he saw her perform opera some time ago, and approached her and told her how much he admired her, and he was obviously bearing these people, these performers in mind for the upcoming events. But she spoke very respectfully about him. And as I mentioned last week, Edward Enninful spoke very respectfully about the king, and has done lately, and I was giving him props for that, for speaking out, because a lot of the woke errati hold Edward Enninful to account for his association with royalty, because he is the editor of Vogue, and some of that world, or shall I say the more audible yakety-yak part of that world, are so horrified that he is an ambassador for the king and the Commonwealth Trust, and is singing the praises of the king in Time magazine's most influential. Well, that's because the king is a beloved friend of his, and it has done sterling work. They can't seem to handle that. But I must criticise Edward Enninful today, because, I mean, fair enough, this was before the ceremony actually started, but in the build-up to it, the cameras were trained on him. He's chewing gum to a penny. I wouldn't really accept it from anybody, but from the editor of Vogue. What sort of representation is that? You know, when we talk about slipping of standards. And where did he put it during the ceremony? Oh, swallowed it, I suppose. Or rolled it up in some kerchief, I ask you. Andre Leon Talley would be turning in his grave. It's a shame he's not around for it, isn't he? He would have looked splendid, even though he might have taken up 3 seats. Yes, Andre Leon Talley. And what would Anna Wintour think? Or Diana Vreeland? Come on, Edward. Chewing gum, I ask you. And he made an entrance with Katy Perry, didn't he? And I've got to admit, I didn't actually recognise her. I saw her swanning about with him. I didn't realise it was her until afterwards, and I saw it online. And I've got to tell you, I think she was quality street perfection. I thought she looked absolutely magnificent. She really did. We're not going to do a great big celebrity rundown, by the way. I'll focus on the royals, but I must say, I thought she looked fabulous. Fabulous. One thing that scares me, by the way, is horses on parade. There's something about them. I don't like the thought of them getting spooked. I saw one of them getting rather exercised. It gives me the fever, but not in a good way, my dear. When I see them all bridling and their heads go up and down, you know, gives me the EBGBs. I just don't want them bolting, but as far as I know, everything went well. Imagine how much manure there is on the streets of London today. It must be someone's job to go around and shovel everything up. That would be a wonderful job for a certain duchess. No, I'm not going to go there today, am I, my dear? Not going to go there. The King's a query, Johnny Thompson. Did him proud, didn't he? He is a credit to the King. Same goes for all the pages of honour. Queen Camilla was upstaged by nobody. Nobody. I thought she looked absolutely beautiful. I thought she was the most stunning woman under that roof for the entire confines of Westminster Abbey. I really do. We all know what she's been denigrated as for 30 years now, and 30 years. We all know what they've said. I saw an absolutely stunning woman, upstaged by nobody. Captivating. And it was her moment, so it's right that that should be the way she looked. The most exquisite. And I must say compliments to her makeup artist, not because her beauty depends on makeup, because it depends on a combination of the cosmetics and her own beautiful spirit shining through with those dancing eyes and that warm smile. And that was the effect that was achieved. The gown by Brucey Oldfield was a dream. It ticked every single box, and it's not dissimilar to my choice of coronation outfit in some ways, although mine has silver embellishments as opposed to gold. But no, I'm not going to draw a comparison between myself and the Queen today, but we'll let her shine, but perfect. Absolutely perfect, both she and the King, for my money. Perfect. William's pledge and kiss to the cheek, yes. That made me blub. It made me blub. Thoughts do run through your mind at that moment. What is Henry thinking? Is he riddled in regret? If he is, I think he hides it even to himself, doesn't he? He just, I want to get back to Archie and tuck him into bed after this surreal day. I know I shouldn't be speaking on that subject, but I'm keeping it to a minimum, my dear. I'm trying to keep that to a minimum. And as you will have seen and read, this was absolutely classic. Henry was hidden behind a feather. This was genius. This was genius. Can you imagine the negotiations on the telephone about where he was going to be seated? Well, I want to be, behind somebody important. Well, what about the Princess Royal? Everybody loves the Princess Royal. Okay, I'll do with that. Don't tell him she's wearing a great big feather. Had the curse of the yellow candle, and now we have the trickery of the red plume. Well done, Annie, my dear. Oh dear, you couldn't make it up, could you? You could not make it up. Hidden behind a feather. On to the important subject of Catherine's appearance. The Princess of Wales's gown, makeup, and lack of tiara. Yes, I have some points to make. Yes, I would change things if I was in control, but as I said earlier, I wouldn't change a thing aside from a tweak of the weather, so bear that in mind when I'm criticising here. She wore an ivory McQueen gown, silk crepe, featuring silver bullion, and the headgear, or the headpiece, was a collaboration with Jess, Collette and McQueen in silver bullion, crystal, silver threadwork, with 3D leaf embroidery. Well, I thought it looked like tin foil, and I don't like it. I'm I've seen it close up, and yes, there are stunning elements to it because it's Catherine, and there are some fabulous photographs of her, especially close up. It looks good, but from anywhere back from a few feet and any further, it looked like a bit of scrunched up tinfoil on her head as far as I'm concerned. It's just not my cup of tea. Her makeup was too heavy, in my opinion. Her blush too dark. All I could see here was the contour. It's not necessary for her, and it ages her. To be fair, she was wearing rich colours over that dress, the reds and the blues, part of a uniform that all the senior royal women were wearing. And so I can understand why the makeup artist might have gone that route, but still, the colouring they chose was too dark. Camilla's makeup was much better. It needed a lightness of touch, especially for a daytime appearance, and especially when she looked immaculate and flawless the evening before. Yes, I'm being picky, but that is what I'm here to do, my dear. So I'm afraid I was not thrilled by Catherine, but I still understand that she looked absolutely exquisite, and I still understand that there was a harmony that went with this uniform that it was decided to wear. So what I'm trying to say to you is that perhaps it's not my taste, some of these decisions, but I think it's good that it is not my taste that is running the show, because sometimes my own personal taste does need a sober moment of reflection and reining in. That's not to say that in my day-to-day life I'm especially gaudy or over the top. My daily uniform is a pair of slim jeans, a grey t-shirt and a cashmere jumper, or a cashmere knit of some kind. That is my daily uniform. So I don't flounce about like this every day. When our experiment is the cocktail party, the disco and the boudoir, my dear, then you know all the stops are out, my dear, and you can go and have fun. And most of the time I get it right, but that is because I've spent the time listening and honing my taste, because I think I've got fairly good taste at the present time. I haven't always. I think now it's okay. The reason I'm rather humble about it is because I know some people with exquisite taste. And even though I don't have what I consider to be the best taste, what I am good at is recognising that and recognising other people with good taste and with what I call the eye. I have some friends, some of whom are part of the fashion industry, the art world, highly praised in that department. Some who aren't, some just humble everyday people with immaculate taste, including, for example, my own grandmother, who has immaculate taste and can always teach one a trick or two and a few lessons. So I don't have the gift or the natural talent of exquisite taste, but I do have the gift of listening and learning. That's what I'm trying to get over to you. I would have wanted them all in tiaras, all the senior royal women. You know, I still feel that way, but I understand and I listen, and I can see that perhaps it's a good thing that it's not me running the show. Because in this case, it worked. I understand that it worked. To hold back, to pull focus to Camilla on her day, next to her king. And it also brought a uniformity to the proceedings. It brought a majesty to the proceedings, to have those senior royal women similarly dressed, with a little flash of green from Anne. She was wonderful in her role as the gold stick, very formal, very professional, and then shrouded in green. And again, it brings to mind what I tell you about the way that I love the twinning of colours, the feel of it. Just that pop of green brought another little something, another little pop of something, another little jewel colour in the treasure chest there that just made all the other colours sing. I'm digressing, but this is the kind of thing that I love to hold forth on. So I understand why it was done. I think it was the right thing to do, but it doesn't mean that I can't get a bit through to you about the fact that there were no tiaras. I mean, embroidery. I don't want embroidery on her head. I want embroidery on a tea cosy or a quilt or some such thing, a doily. On a head, on a royal head, my dear. I don't care how shiny it is. I don't care how exquisitely it's made. That's embroidery. I want gems. I want diamonds. But it's not about what I want. It's about what works for the ceremony. And it worked. That is why, ultimately, I accept it. The kids looked wonderful. Charlotte in her pure white. Wonderful. They all did very well, especially under that kind of pressure. Wonderful. And Queen Camilla's grandchildren did wonderful. First time really in the spotlight. Fantastic. I understand the story they were trying to tell, the tapestry they were weaving, the context, scene by scene, how one fed into each other. Flawlessly. It was executed so well. Who else would I have had in tiaras, apart from Catherine? Well, I would have had Princess Anne. I would have had Sophie Edinburgh. I would have had Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. Princesses! And what did we have? A headband and some ugly blue hat. I mean, they deserve to be in tiaras. The royal duchesses, all of them. Princess Michael of Kent, although she looked lovely in her silver number, she kind of matched her handsome husband's beard, silvery beard. Princess Michael of Kent, one of my favourites, you know that, my dear. And it's interesting looking back on the late Queen's coronation and seeing Prince Michael of Kent when he was a sprightly young dude coming through. So interesting to see him in his spring season and now in winter. 70 years apart. Same occasion, 70 years apart in a completely different era. Incredible. But yes, I would have liked to see Princess Michael marry Christine in tiara, but it's good that I'm not in charge. It's good that I'm not in charge, my dear, isn't it? I also think that the idea of having them in this sort of uniform, their robes remind a bit of the Order of the Garter appearances that they make, don't they? The Noble Order of the Garter in their blue and red numbers. I think it was a fantastic, inspired idea for the brand management. It made them look like a unit, a support team. It showed the hierarchy and showed the whole service illustrated and made the point that the king is there to serve and the family around are there to support the king that serves us. You know, that he is our royal servant on a mission, a religious mission, a holy mission, if you will. And that point was made very strongly. I probably didn't reach the cloth ears of Henry. He doesn't seem to realise that, understand that notion and get it. And I enjoyed the way that the various colours were used to denote those positions of hierarchy and were used to separate. And it brings in a sort of aspect of the rainbow, of the spectrum, and of the chakra system. It's found everywhere. In physicality and in spirituality. It's always at the top of the spectrum, isn't it? In the chakra system, or at the rainbow where there's a pot of gold. At the top you always have white and ultraviolet, or ultraviolet and white. And they're the colours that we saw for the king and queen, as well as many other colours, but the main vision of white and purple was reserved for them at the sort of top end of the spectrum, with all the other beautiful primaries and secondaries coming through and filtering through with other members of royalty. Flawless coverage from the BBC, I believe, wasn't it? 150 video cameras capturing the interior of Westminster Abbey. Flawless coverage, world class. What BBC do well, they do better than anybody else and have done for many decades and continue to, even though they've disappointed many of us with some of their ideologies over the last few years. They are still at the top of their game and unbeatable in so many aspects. And I ended up watching the proceedings on the BBC, on their iPlayer service, and I was kind of going back and forth between a couple of different versions, and they all had commentators, which I didn't want. But I was watching the BBC one, and it was being covered by Hugh Edwards. I like Kirsty Young, but Hugh Edwards kept rabbiting on, and I kept having to mute it. And I thought, shut up. And eventually I Googled without commentary, BBC Coronation without commentary, and it came up. So they were offering a version without commentary, and that's how I watched it. No commentary, no narration. Some people need this. Some of you told me you were watching various YouTubers doing live streams. I think some of you have a more extrovert nature than me, I guess, where you need company and will want to be chaperoned through. I don't mean to besmirch you, dears, but that's a complete antithesis for me. I didn't want any narration. I found it much more enjoyable just seeing it with no talking whatsoever, seeing the service as it was. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I also adored the moment after the crowning where Camilla approaches the newly crowned king and curtsied. And what a wonderful moment in their love story. What an absolutely wonderful moment that was. From what I can see so far, it seems that Harry took a commercial flight as soon as the service ended. However, I got some information wrong in the previous broadcast, or I should say press reports were wrong, saying that Harry had flown in by private jet. As I said, this was unconfirmed, and it turned out to be untrue. So I want to withdraw the criticism I made on that particular time and say, sorry, Harry, we got it wrong. It seems that you didn't take a private jet on this occasion. I think the criticism of his private jetting remains true because he still does it a lot when it's unnecessary. But on this occasion, it appears that he got a commercial flight. So I will doff my hat to him in that respect and say, should put my claws away until I know. Lesson learned. Lip readers have been suggesting that he told Jackie Brooksbank, who is sitting next to, apparently he said, I will be straight to the airport. And he leapt into a car in the direction of Heathrow Airport. One thing I noticed is that he had crumpled tails. The tail of his suit was crumpled. And I know it happens to the best of us, but how long had he been sitting on it? Princess Beatrice was stunning in pink. I really liked that outfit. It was beautiful. Not keen on the hairband, but what can you do? I've seen her wear worse ones. Zara was exquisite in powder blue. Really lovely colour, really lovely shade. Princess Eugenie, navy blue, understated. I thought it was a bit drab, to be honest, but not everyone wants to stand out. Rubbish hat, absolutely rubbish hat. But nice chunky gems she had on. I appreciated that. And good makeup and hair. And actually, she stole the show for me. Was it the night before? Yeah, on Coronation Eve. I'll cover this in a forthcoming broadcast. But they all had a night out at Oswald's. Coronation Eve. Had a fabulous time. And she rocked it for me. I thought usually looked fabulous compared to usual. She looked great. Another one that's been stealing the show is Penny Mordaunt, who looked beautiful and strong. The clergy were magnificent, I thought, every single one of them. Male, female, black, white, and everything in between. They were wonderful. The other foreign dignitaries, or rather the religious leaders from other faiths, it was so dignified. It was so regal on behalf of all of them. You know, the feeling of goodwill fostered was magnificent. There have been rumblings in the press criticising Harry, or pointing out the fact that he's under scrutiny for not singing part of God Save the King as King Charles walked past him. Now, I want to urge caution and say that we cannot be absolutely sure what happened here, but the media are suggesting that he sort of was mumbling along and then wouldn't sing God Save Our Noble King. His mouth sort of stopped moving. Well, I played it back and played it from what I could see, you know, trying to look beyond the feather, trying to really scrutinise and see. I shouldn't really do that because I think it's unfair to him, to be honest. Who knows what's going through his mind, his emotions, if he's really singing. Sometimes I don't feel like singing out loud in a church congregation, so I'll sort of mumble, and my mouth doesn't move very much. But I did look at absolutely everyone around him, and even those that were singing quietly, you could still see them enunciating the words, Noble King, God Save this, that and the fourth, and everybody knows the words. Harry knows the words, and I just feel if you're going to sing it, you know, put some gusto into it, or if you choose not to, keep your mouth shut and don't bother coming, to be honest, you know. But if he was in any way trying to make a point or couldn't bring himself to call his father noble at the time of his crowning, because, you know, he's just so pure that he can't put false words in his mouth and spout off such a lie when he doesn't believe it. And I'm only saying if that is the case, then shame on you, Henry, shame on you. And that just proves, if that is true, that there is not an ounce of nobility in you. What's the point of mumbling along, knowing that everyone's looking at you, wondering if you're actually He knows that people are scrutinising him during that line. He knows it. He sees all the headlines. We all know that he goes through the papers and magazines and online and the comment sections. He knows. So I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I can sense a little bit of shadiness, and I just think, grow up right now. And if you don't want to sing along at your father's coronation, then don't bother coming. But I really hope that is not the case. Lady Louise looked absolutely beautiful, stunning. Recruit them, king. Those Edinburgh children, fabulous, although it probably ruined their life. I'm sure they'll be a lot happier without becoming working members of the royal family. But we need some young blood, don't we? We really do, because we've got a while before the 3 Wales children grow up, and even then they'll be kind of alone. This was the shame about the Spencer marriage to Charles, is that it only produced 2 issues, the heir and the spare, and the spare happened to be extremely unreliable, I should say. So that was a pity, because the late Queen, of course, had 4 children, a whole tier to do various biddings on her behalf, and William and Catherine will have at least 3 children to do some of the royal work coming up, but we need more, and as Princess Anne, as the Princess Royal has made clear lately, slimming down, no good, so we need more recruits. Come on, you need to start putting the feelers out here for some fabulous younger royals for further balcony appearances. The Middleton family as well looked very pleasant. I think Pippa wore lemon and she looked lovely, and Carol was in blue. Nice. And I'll round off with 2 comments that I received not long after the coronation ended. They were the only ones I've had time to look at, and they happened to be from American fruits. It was just a question of timing. Pansy13 says, "Hi River, thinking of you sobbing at the coronation. I'm an atheist, Democrat, not really believing in royalty, unless it'll bring blessing to the people. I'm sobbing, believe me. Old ritual makes me weak and believing." Well, I'm very glad you enjoyed it, my dear, and I guess you're that kind of character that likes watching the mundane transform into the magical. A bit of the old fairy tale, but rooted in reality. That's the thing. It's this kind of the fluff of the fairy tale, if you like, but it is, when you watch today's service, you see that it is deep rooted in something really profound and really meaningful. It really is. I'm not just spouting it off. It really does mean something. That's what I think is so fabulous. It's like, it's the roots, it's the foundations of the tree. It's like the deep red of that chakra system that, like the tree of life, wends its way up through the branches and through the chakras and all the different royal colours to the white light and the indigo, the ultraviolet, the crowning at the top, the grandeur, the leaves and blossoms of the tree, the fruits of the tree, and you see them there, but they exist because of the deep foundations in the earth. Am I reaching? Perhaps, but that's the way I see it, and maybe that's the way that you see it. It depends on your sensibility, but not everybody has that sensibility, and that's why I will end on a remark from Mallory. Again, why can I never read my scrawl? Malkery, Mallory, I think it's McLaren. Anyway, Mallory dear, I was underwhelmed by the coronation, and I think it was appropriate not to be completely consumed with emotion about the whole thing. I went in with that expectation, but then I struggled to stay awake. I'm in the US, and I'm glad to say I only caught some important bits. So you are underwhelmed. Well, what whelms you, my dear? That's the question. What whelms you? Well, I accept that, and I recognise it. There's no point asking you, how could you not be moved if you weren't moved? And I really do think that it just comes down to our separate influences. What moves? It's what gets you in the solar plexus. What colour is that chakra? It's the yellow one, isn't it? It's the yellow one. Red, orange, yellow. Base, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, etc., etc., third eye. The solar plexus is what gets you there and makes you laugh or cry or and it didn't get you there. It didn't get you there, and that's fine. You can't help it, they can't help it. But it did get Pansy 13. But what you saw before you, my dear, was the most splendid divas of the opera world, Welsh voices, the finest composers, the finest orchestras, musicians, fabulous guests, dignitaries, a historical story, a king 70 years, an heir apparent. It was quivering with history. There was drama, there was pathos of the family feuds, solemn oaths, holy moments, religious ceremony, an abbey the size of an entire country, my dear. Did you see the size of Westminster Abbey? Can you see from the rafters how big we're looking there? All kinds of beauty, all kinds of colour, all tied together and woven in this tapestry of fabulous logistics. Well, how can I convince you? I can't convince you. There's no point in trying to convince somebody. If they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. But I got it, and it roped me in, and it got me in the solar plexus, and it ticked all my boxes, my dear, and I loved it. So I'm sorry that it didn't, that it underwhelmed you, my dear. I would love to know what whelms you, but it underwhelmed you, and I do accept it. But for those of you that loved it, I'm glad you did. For those of you that didn't, well, you've got another few years until Prince William can have a go when he gets his turn, can't you, as King William V? But until then, we have Queen Camilla and King Charles III, crowned today. And thank you for sharing the experience with me. I hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you for joining me. Please let me know what you thought about the ceremony, the lack of tiaras. I think it's going to be a controversial subject, and the riots of colour. Thank you, my dears. My tip jar is in the description box below, and I'll catch up with you next time. Stay royal, channel the royal spirit, have a fabulous night, have a little quaff of champagne if you fancy a little bit of that, and I'll see you next time. Toodle pip, my dears. Channel the royal spirit, and God save the King.